The first thing I saw that morning wasn't the inspectors. It was Diane, standing at the edge of my driveway in a pale gray blazer, holding a leather folder against her chest like she was attending a hearing she'd arranged herself. Behind her were two county vehicles. White, unmarked except for the seal on the doors. One man with a clipboard, another with a tablet. Both of them staring at my house like they expected to find a meth lab, a sinkhole, or a body buried under the patio. I had just stepped outside with my coffee, still half asleep, still in work boots and yesterday's t-shirt, and for one strange second, the whole scene felt unreal. Then the older inspector looked at me and asked, "Mr. Nolan Pierce?" "Yeah." "We received a complaint regarding illegal structural modifications, unsafe electrical work, unpermitted drainage changes, and possible unlawful occupancy in the detached outbuilding." I remember blinking once, then twice because my first real thought was, she actually did it. I looked at Diane. She didn't smile, didn't need to. That look on her face was worse. Satisfied, calm, almost relieved, like she had finally found the button she thought would make my life collapse. What she didn't know, what she absolutely should have known before she invited county inspectors to parade across my property, was that every single project on my house had been permitted, documented, photographed, approved, and backed up in a hard folder labeled by date. She thought she was sending trouble to my door. What she actually sent was official proof that she had been lying for months. And by the time those inspectors left, Diane Holloway wasn't the one watching my house with that smug little expression anymore. She was the one trying to explain why none of her accusations matched reality. "My name is Nolan Pierce, and I bought my house in a neighborhood called Briar Hollow outside Raleigh, North Carolina, after my marriage fell apart. It wasn't a fresh start in the inspiring kind of way. It was more like a controlled landing. I needed a place that felt quiet enough to survive in. The house had an older brick exterior, a long driveway, a detached workshop in the back, and a patch of yard that looked like nobody had loved it in at least 10 years, which, honestly, made it perfect for me. I wanted something I could fix, something that gave me work to do with my hands when my head got too loud. For the first few months, Briar Hollow was exactly what I needed. Then Diane Holloway became HOA president. Diane was one of those women who spoke softly the way some people carry knives, carefully, elegantly, and always with intent. Mid-50s, always polished, always carrying a folder, always appearing at exactly the moment something on your property started looking better without her permission. The first time she came over, I was sanding trim on the detached workshop. She stood at the end of the driveway and said, "I wanted to discuss whether the current work has board visibility." I remember looking down at the trim in my hands, then back at her. "Board visibility?" "Yes," she said. "Exterior modifications can raise concern when they alter neighborhood character." Neighborhood character. That phrase came up a lot with Diane. She used it for everything: paint colors, planters, tool storage, a work trailer, even mulch. I told her the workshop already existed, I was just repairing and repainting it, and everything structural had been submitted through the right channels. She smiled. "Well, that should be easy to confirm." At the time, I thought she was being annoying. Later, I realized she was probing for weakness. That's what people like Diane do. They don't ask questions because they need answers. They ask questions to see where pressure might work. The first letter arrived 6 days later. Notice of architectural concern. It claimed the workshop improvements may exceed the scope of visual maintenance previously disclosed to the board. That phrasing was pure Diane, vague enough to sound serious, meaningless enough to say nothing. I sent back the approval packet. Then came the next letter. This one asked whether my electrical work had city clearance. It did. Then came another, this time about my drainage trench near the side yard, also permitted. And another about whether the workshop might be functionally converted. That one annoyed me enough to call the management office directly. The woman who answered sounded exhausted before I even gave my address. After a long pause, she admitted there was no formal violation file against me, just repeated homeowner complaints requesting review. I asked who was requesting them. She wouldn't say. She didn't need to. I already knew. So I started documenting everything. Every HOA email, every notice, every permit, every invoice, every contractor inspection sheet. Then I installed cameras. Front drive, side gate, back patio, workshop door. I didn't do it because I was afraid. I did it because people like Diane never stop at one complaint. They escalate. And she did. The real shift came when I finished repainting the workshop. Charcoal siding, fresh white trim, clean lines. It looked better than it had in years. Apparently, that was the problem. One Saturday morning, I stepped outside and found Diane standing near my side fence with a man from the landscaping committee, both of them staring toward the workshop like it had personally offended them. "Can I help you?" I asked. Diane didn't even look embarrassed. "We're evaluating possible runoff concerns." "From paint?" She ignored the tone in my voice. "The visual changes may correspond with other unreviewed modifications." That was her trick. She'd attach one fake concern to another until the whole thing sounded like a cluster of mysterious wrongdoing. I told them both to get off my property line. Diane gave me that patient little smile. "The county tends to take these things more seriously than HOAs do." At the time, I thought it was a bluff, a line, a little suburban threat dressed up as concern. 3 weeks later, 2 county inspectors were standing in my driveway. Back on that morning, after the older inspector read out the complaints, I asked him, "Would you like the permit folder first or the tour?" He looked mildly surprised. "Permit folder?" "Great." I led them into the house just long enough to get the binder from the hall cabinet. I'd organized it by project: roof patch, trench drain correction, workshop electrical, siding repair, exterior paint, final inspections, contractor licensing info. The older inspector flipped through it slowly. The younger one checked dates on the tablet. Neither of them said much. That was what made Diane uneasy. I could feel it. Silence is dangerous when you're the one who lied to get people somewhere. We started outside. They checked the workshop first. Panel upgrade? Approved. Outlets? Approved. No insulation, no bed, no kitchen, no illegal occupancy, no conversion. Just shelves, tools, a bench, and 2 paint cans. Then they checked the drainage trench. Clean, documented, signed off. Then the rear corner where the complaint had alleged structural additions beyond approved footprint. Nothing but the same storage overhang that had existed before I bought the property. The older inspector stood up from the corner post, brushed dirt off his knee, and looked toward Diane. That was the first moment she looked nervous. Not panicked, not yet, just off balance, because nothing she described was appearing in front of them. And the more normal my property looked, the stranger her complaint started to feel. Then the inspector asked the question that changed everything. "Mr. Pierce, have you had previous issues with this reporting party?" I said, "Would you like the short version or the camera version?" Diane moved before she spoke. A quick shift of her shoulders, almost like she wanted to interrupt physically. "This is not about me," she said. The older inspector turned to her. "Ma'am, I didn't ask you." That silence afterward was one of the nicest sounds I've ever heard. I showed them the first clip at the driveway table. Diane entering through my side gate 2 weeks earlier with her phone out, photographing the workshop. Then another. Diane standing near the trench drain with the landscaping committee guy saying, "If county review starts, he'll stop the work." Then the one that ended her morning. She was at the back fence with another board member, talking low, not realizing the workshop camera audio carried farther than she thought. "The point isn't violation," she said. "The point is pressure." I watched the older inspector replay that clip twice. Then he set my phone down very carefully and looked at Diane. No anger, no raised voice, just that flat, professional expression people wear when they realize they've been used. "Ma'am," he said, "did you submit this complaint?" Diane folded her arms. "I reported concerns shared by the community." "Did you personally verify any of the alleged illegal occupancy?" She hesitated. There were signs. "What signs?" "Lights, activity, deliveries." I almost laughed. Lights, activity, and deliveries. In other words, a man using his own workshop. The younger inspector looked up from the folder. "Did you enter the property to inspect anything yourself?" Diane's answer came too fast. "Only visually." Lie, and I had the clip. I played it. Diane in my side yard, 3 feet onto my property, phone out, taking photos toward the workshop window. The younger inspector exhaled slowly through his nose. The older one didn't react at all, which somehow was worse. Then he said the sentence that finished her. "So this complaint was filed after repeated personal contact, repeated HOA pressure, and direct property entry by the complainant?" Diane tried to recover. "This homeowner has been difficult." He didn't blink. "That's not a code violation." That line landed so hard I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The inspectors spent another 15 minutes finishing notes, taking a few photos, and confirming what was already obvious. There were no code violations on site matching the complaint. Before leaving, the older inspector handed me his card and asked me to email the clips and copies of the notice history. Then he turned to Diane one last time. "False or exaggerated reports create their own record, ma'am." He didn't threaten her, didn't need to. Some words arrive heavy enough on their own. After the county vehicles pulled away, Diane stood at the edge of my driveway in total silence. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. Not defeated, but diminished. Like she had finally discovered that all her folders and phrases and little performances meant nothing once actual officials started asking basic questions. Then she turned and walked home without saying a word. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Because that afternoon, the HOA sent an urgent request for clarification on my workshop status. Too fast. Far too fast. Which meant Diane was trying to build parallel pressure now that the county route had failed. That was a mistake. A huge one. Because now Rachel Boone got involved. For real. Rachel had already reviewed my file once before, back when Diane was just sending stupid letters. But after the county visit, she shifted from advisory mode to predator mode. She sent the HOA a preservation demand before sunset. Every email, board chat, management note, complaint, photo, and architectural discussion tied to my address had to be saved. Then she sent Diane a separate cease and desist through council regarding trespass, harassment, and interference with lawful property use. That was when Briar Hollow started cracking. One board member resigned. Another quietly forwarded Rachel an internal email chain where Diane had written, "If inspectors show up, he'll understand he doesn't control the timeline anymore." And another, "Official review creates leverage where courtesy fails." Leverage, not safety, not code, not neighborhood welfare. Leverage. That was what all of this had really been. Diane wanted my projects frozen, my confidence shaken, my house turned into a source of stress until I either gave in or moved more slowly under her thumb. Rachel loved those emails. At the hearing, she laid everything out cleanly. Permit trail, inspection sign-offs, video clips, fake complaints, trespass. Then the county summary noting no supporting violations were found on site. By the time she read the leverage email aloud, the room had gone dead quiet. Diane's attorney tried calling it overzealous governance. Rachel replied, "Overzealous governance usually doesn't require trespassing, fabricated occupancy claims, and a strategy built around pressure rather than violation." The judge didn't even pretend to be impressed. The order came a week later. No direct contact, no unsupported enforcement, no HOA action against permitted property work absent actual documented basis, and a written warning that using official processes as harassment could expose both individuals and associations to liability. Diane resigned 9 days later for personal reasons. Of course she did. That's always the way. Never because they lied, never because they got caught, just personal reasons. The workshop still stands, fresh paint, clean trim, proper permits. Exactly where it was before Diane decided to turn it into a campaign. And sometimes, when I unlock it in the morning and the light hits the new siding just right, I think about that first moment in the driveway. The county trucks, Diane's folded arms, that satisfied look on her face. She thought sending inspectors to my house would force me into line. Instead, it forced the truth into the open. Huge mistake. How did you like the story? Subscribe to my YouTube channel.